thanks. And we're very pleased to have with us Hubert Price, who is the head of the UN Support Office in Somalia, who is here to brief you on the situation in that country. Mr. Price, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, members of the international community. I've just concluded my time as the head of UNSOS, effective, I think, midnight tonight. But if you just heard, the replacement has now been announced and has cleared the council and the SG, et cetera. The United Nations Support Office in Somalia, or UNSOS, was established in November of 2015. It succeeded the UN Support Office for AMISOM, or UNSOA, which had been established in 2009 to provide logistical field support to the African Union Mission in Somalia, or AMISOM. Our core mission is to provide support services to 3 clients within Somalia. The largest client with the most complex support needs, involving over 20,000 members, is AMISOM, who have the dangerous and challenging task of reducing the influence and control of the violent extremist group Al-Shabaab. AMISOM was established in 2007 and first began receiving UN support in 2009. UNSOA, which was at that time assisting AMISOM, which had a strength of about 8,000. AMISOM has since grown in size and capability and has enabled it to remove Al-Shabaab control over large areas of southern Somalia. Most importantly, AMISOM efforts have enabled Somalia to establish a parliament and federal state administrations, as well as conduct 2 electoral processes in 2012 and 2016. Both resulted in a peaceful transition of political power. The goal now is for Somalia to hold one-person, one-vote elections in 2021 and complete a review of their national constitution, among other state-building tasks. The cost to AMISOM troop and police contributing countries in terms of lives and resources has been truly extraordinary, and I both salute and humbly acknowledge their incredible sacrifices. UNSOS also delivers basic support commodities to over 10,000 Somali soldiers participating in joint operations with AMISOM. These items, such as food, fuel, defense stores, communications equipment, vehicles, and tents, are paid by a donor trust fund. The UN Assistance Mission in Somalia, UNSOM, a special political mission, is also an important UNSOS client. It receives the standard package of UN mission support services. UNSOM has the difficult task of supporting Somalia build a federal government system, a new paradigm for them, and to assist them to resolve long-standing internal conflicts, including deadly interclan rivalry and disputes, strengthen governance and accountability, promote respect for human rights, and assist and enable humanitarian action, most recently helping to avert a deadly famine. Another key UNSOM task is to assist Somalia to coordinate international donor support, particularly in the security sector. I was deployed to Somalia in October of 2016, and since then I've had the opportunity to witness the good work undertaken by the United Nations in partnership with the African Union, often in challenging circumstances, all in support of the peace process in Somalia. The case of Somalia demonstrates how much we can achieve through cooperation with regional organizations. The United Nations and the African Union partnership in Somalia builds on decades of strong relations between both institutions. It is my hope that this partnership will be further developed, not just for the sake of peace in Somalia, but across the African continent for the sustainable peace and development, protection of the environment, human rights, and development of humanitarian assistance to those most in need. Somalia is preparing to take charge of its national security as the AMISOM transition begins. The steps that the federal government of Somalia has taken and continues to take in rebuilding the nation are commendable. I take this opportunity to appeal for renewed international community support for peace and development in Somalia. The progress that we seek will not happen if we stop supporting the gallant efforts of the men and women of AMISOM and the Somali security forces, who are risking their lives to ensure Somalia becomes a stable and secure nation. Progress will not continue if collective responsibility is not shared. I wish to extend my appreciation and gratitude to the African Union, especially to the Commissioner for Peace and Security, Smal Shurgi, for his active support and personal efforts that enabled our successful personal and organizational partnership in Somalia. I also wish to acknowledge my privilege and honor to accompany the chairperson of the African Union Commission His Excellency Mustafa Faki Mohammed on his first overseas trip after being appointed chairperson, which was to Mogadishu. The AU-UN partnership in Somalia has been further strengthened under his active leadership. My experience in Somalia has been enriching, and I look forward to continued support and more sustainable solutions to the challenges that Somalia faces. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mr. Price. Yes, please.
Thank you very much for this briefing on behalf of the United Nations Correspondents Association. My name is Edith Lutterer from the Associated Press. A new report from the experts monitoring sanctions against Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State extremist group says that the Al-Qaeda affiliate Al-Shabaab, quote, remains resilient and has sustained its dominance, close quote, over Islamic State affiliates in Somalia. And it says that Al-Shabaab poses a greater threat than the Islamic State group to the African Union peacekeeping force in the country, and that it has succeeded in pursuing its goal of establishing a presence beyond Somalia, carrying out operations in Kenya, Ethiopia, and Djibouti. I wonder whether you agree with this assessment and what you think is being done or needs to be done to combat Al-Shabaab.
Thank you. The initial force projection of AMISOM, if you will, when they moved into Somalia, moved Al-Shabaab out of Mogadishu and out of a number of areas where they had held strongholds. It's true that Al-Shabaab continues to be a real factor in Somalia. I mean, that's why AMISOM has still got 20,000 troops on the ground that are still actively engaged. It is an active combat environment. The presence of ISIL in Somalia is also there, but very small. And in that context, I would agree that Al-Shabaab is the much greater threat. Certainly it's been reported in the press that there have been attacks in Kenya that Al-Shabaab has claimed credit for. And you find very active involvement on the borders between both Ethiopia and Kenya because they recognize the threat that it poses. But we have to look at the fact that there have been successful elections, certainly not supported by Al-Shabaab. So there are, I think, real progress that has been made in dealing with that threat. But it is still very much a threat. So I think that that's no question about that.
Thank you, Abdul Hamid Sayam from the Arabic daily Al-Quds Al-Arabi. Thank you for the briefing. And I want to know more about those countries trying to help Somalia rebuild itself. I heard that Turkey is building a number of projects. I think probably Erdogan was the only head of a state who visited Somalia and promised some substantial aid to that country. Can you give us more information about other countries who are trying to extend a helping hand to the Somalis? Thank you.
Well, currently there are a number of countries that are involved in, for example, helping to train the Somali security forces. There are any number of humanitarian activities that are ongoing, but certainly in addition to Turkey, the U.S., the U.K., the UAE have all got extensive presences for training and building facilities and so forth in the country. And the recent approach of this, what they call the comprehensive approach to security, looking at how holistically to address the issues of stability in Somalia beyond just a military engagement with Al-Shabaab, but looking at the whole thing that needs to be done. And a number of the international member states are very actively involved with the Somali government, with the African Union and the EU, all coming together to try and look at how to better support what can be done there. So there's quite an active engagement by many countries, in addition, as you mentioned, Turkey.
Ibtisam?
Hi, my name is Ibtisam Azim from Al-Arab Al-Jadid newspaper. My question goes, you talked about having or being able to have Al-Shabaab out of some areas. So the question is about long-term goals. What do you do after you get them out of these areas? How can you guarantee through the mission? I know you touched upon it now in your answer, but could you please be more specific and give us more details which work you're doing in the ground after, beside the military work? Thank you.
Well, the view has been that perhaps for some times in the past there was more of a focus on a military success with Al-Shabaab as opposed to other underlying factors that were giving rise to the whole situation in Somalia as it exists now. So that's led to a somewhat different approach where the idea being that you get Al-Shabaab out, but areas like the rule of law, humanitarian activities, the government infrastructure that needs to come in to ensure that the community has economic development, it has a legal framework, et cetera, that those things are in place to come in and help stabilize that area. And that's the approach that is being taken at this time through what's called the comprehensive approach to security that involves a number of member states as well as the Somali central government and the federal member states as well, looking at how to ensure that you don't have this vacuum that Al-Shabaab moves back into when you get them out and then nothing happens. So at the moment, a lot of this is still very much a work in progress as they look at how to bring this about, everything from who pays for it, who's there, and how this is going to work. But that's the goal, is to have that structure in place to avoid another situation.
Matthew.
Yeah, Ben Ivansky with Fox News. Just back on the Al-Qaeda affiliate, Al-Shabaab, how influential is Al-Qaeda over Al-Shabaab in regards to operations, coordination with these attacks? Is it purely Al-Shabaab working on its own, or is it actually working with it in coordination with Al-Qaeda?
That's one I'm not really sure I can answer. From the information that we get, we're dealing more with Al-Shabaab at that level in Somalia. There are other member states and other groups that have maybe got a wider look at how it's linked in with Al-Qaeda on a greater scale.
Sure, thanks a lot. Matthew Lee, Intercity Press, on behalf of the Free UN Coalition for Access. Thanks for doing the briefing, even on your last day. Much hats off to you. I mean, in your job. I wanted to ask you about I'm sure you've seen the audit report about UNSOS and environmental problems. And I wanted to, it seemed pretty damning, and many people were surprised after what happened in Haiti with MINUSTA that this level of seeming inattention could take place. They talked about untreated waste. They talked about danger to the population. So I wanted to know, since you were there, maybe it's too dangerous to do it. What happened that so many years after the UN supposedly learned a lesson of bad sanitation practices in Haiti, leading to the death of 10,000 people by cholera, that what is alleged to have happened took place in UNSOS?
Yeah, I mean, certainly the OIOS report raised any number of concerns, but I want to highlight that these had been identified, as was written in the response to the report. There was action that was being taken even before that report was done. First, at the time that UNSOS came into play in 2015, we have to look back and think of the fact that a lot of what UNSOS did in the beginning, or UNSOA, was actually being done from Nairobi and Mombasa. So the combat activities that initially happened on the ground, have taken time for the displacement of Al-Shabaab, the African Union forces to move out, and in some cases it was and still is a very dangerous environment, and it's taken time to get people out there. UNSOA, which became UNSOS, then made a concerted effort to get more people onto the ground in Mogadishu, along with some out in the regions. So the analysis has been done about, what were the environmental impacts, and you're correct that, the lessons learned in the past were to look at how we can improve the situation in Somalia. and steps were being taken to put this in place. It was noted that staff are being recruited for both environmental, occupational health and safety, and so forth to bring in, as well as increasing funding in the budget. Even, things like the wastewater treatment plants that are now being dispersed. At the moment, one of the problems that you face in Somalia is the movement on the roads because of the Al-Shabaab techniques of using IEDs, remotely controlled or command detonated improvised explosive devices on the roads. So that forces very much to be deployed by air. And that also takes longer and is more timely to get a lot of these things in place. So, perhaps some of this could have been done a little bit faster, but steps have been put in place to move this forward and correct and to fix these. Also keeping in mind that that AMISOM is an African Union force, and we're working in partnership to make sure they are at the right level and right standards and bring in the equipment that we've got. So I think the steps have been taken to correct this, but Somalia is a very dangerous and complex environment, and that has led to some of the delays in getting this thing in place.
I just wanted to ask one follow-up, just because it goes directly to safety. It seemed like the reasoning given for not having even monitored how much used oil was being held by the contractor was that it was too dangerous to go out and get the records from the contractor's office. So the question arises, why didn't the contractor bring it to UNSOS? Or was it too dangerous to bring even...
Yeah, no, I saw that in one of the reports. Yeah, and I get the point. I don't know that there is a good answer for that, and maybe there was just a lapse in asking him to exactly do that. What I would say is that as we're moving forward here, a lot of effort has been made to get this whole thing brought online and brought up to a higher standard, and I think we're making good progress there.
Okay. Evelyn?
Thank you. Evelyn Leopold. There have been a lot of attacks lately in Kabul, suicide bombings, and before that, other threats and deaths. What kind of pressure does it put on your projects? Are you among the first responders, or how do you cope with that? Or you don't?
Well, I mean, in a situation like the bomb blast that took place back, I guess, in October, I mean, with a large death and injury rate in Mogadishu, I can't say that we are the first responders based on the security situation, because at times one of the techniques that Al-Shabaab has used is to target the bomb and then target the responders when they come in. So, what happens is we have to look at what can be done before we respond as part of a larger effort by the Somalis and others to try and get in and help. But, we did have, from dog teams and other things that went in to assist with that. I think at the end of the day, I mean, obviously there's a psychological impact on all the staff that are there. Our ability to travel freely within, certainly in Mogadishu and out in the regions as well, is quite restricted. Certain procedures are in place for, going out, and those kinds of things are impacted in comparison to other peacekeeping operations I've been in over the years, where you have much more ability to maneuver. And also, our role in dealing with AMISOM is really supporting AMISOM, and so it's there's a difference there as far as, we're not exactly first responders in that sense. Okay. The UN, I mean. Okay. Yeah.
And with that, I mean, thank you very much for your briefing, and also thank you for doing an end-of-term briefing. I hope that gets to be a pattern for officials around here.
I don't know about that. Since I'm leaving, I can say yes, it should be, but I don't know.
Okay. Well, then it's resolved here at least.
Yeah. No, I'm going to go back to being retired. Thank you. Okay. Good. Thank you.
Have a great time.